This is Community Radio Networks. It is Wednesday, the 10th of April. Eid Mubarak to those of you who are celebrating the festival, as the month of Ramzan drew to an end. Let's get you all the information you need to take on the day today. And we'll start with the world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Madgil. Eid has begun in Gaza with Israeli drones buzzing overhead. Israeli military drones still buzzing in this part of the Rafah district, just to remind Palestinians that there is no sense of safety, even on a day that's supposed to be a day for celebration and rejoicing. Still, Palestinians were there today performing the prayers for Eid, as they have been gathering and congratulating each other despite the great deal of devastation, sadness and grief that surrounds them. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has set a date for a military offensive into Rafah, despite growing warnings that it could lead to high civilian casualties. More than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering in the southern city after being forced to flee their homes. Mr. Netanyahu's comments followed calls by the far-right government allies to step up military actions against Hamas. The Prime Minister's popularity has plummeted after 6 months of war. Israel's war cabinet met to discuss the latest U.S. proposal for a ceasefire after Hamas said it was reviewing the plan but accused Israel of remaining intransigent and failing to respond to the demands of the Palestinian people. Israel faces a deadline to present to the country's top court measures to increase aid to the besieged Gaza, where hunger is spreading after more than 6 months of fighting. 5 non-profit groups have taken the state to court, accusing authorities of restricting the entry of relief items and failing to respect their obligations as an occupying power to provide basic necessities to Gazans. Hamas said an Israeli proposal on that ceasefire did not meet the demands of Palestinian factions, but it would study the offer further and deliver its response to mediators. The proposal was handed to the Palestinian movement by Egyptian and Qatari mediators at talks in Cairo that aim to find a way out of the crisis in the Gaza Strip, now in its 7th month. And it is at the end of the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan that the United Nations has reiterated its call for de-escalation on the Lebanese-Israeli border. Hezbollah fighters have shot down an advanced Israeli drone worth an estimated $5 million, and footage of that incident posted on social media shows this drone on fire, nosediving to earth over Lebanese territory. And Hezbollah claimed it was an Hermes 900 model. Israel's foreign minister threatened this morning that his country's forces would strike Iran directly if the Islamic Republic launched an attack from its territory against Israel, as tensions between the rival powers flare following the killings of Iranian generals in a blast at the Iranian consulate in Syria. In a speech marking the end of Ramzan, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei again took aim at Israel, saying the state must and will face retaliation for the bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus on the 1st of this month. The West needs a plan B in case Israel presses ahead with an invasion of Rafah, according to Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, holding a press conference in Washington, D.C. alongside Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State. Pedro Sanchez is delivering a speech to MPs presenting Spain's policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And President Biden has expressed sympathy for Palestinians in Gaza in a message to Muslims marking Eid. President Biden upped his criticism of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's role in the Israel-Hamas war, but did not indicate any significant changes in U.S. policy towards its Middle East ally. President Biden called Prime Minister Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza a mistake and called for his government to flood the beleaguered territory with aid, ramping up pressure on Israel to reach a ceasefire and widening a rift between the two staunch allies. The Arizona Supreme Court ruled yesterday the state must adhere to a 160-year-old law barring all abortions except in cases when it is necessary to save a pregnant person's life, a significant ruling that will make a Civil War-era abortion law enforceable in the state. The law can be traced to as early as 1864, before Arizona became a state, and was codified in 1901, carries a prison sentence of 2 to 5 years for abortion providers, and puts Arizona among the states with the strictest abortion laws in the the country alongside Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi, where bans exist with almost no exceptions. Democrats pounced on this Arizona Supreme Court ruling that permits enforcement of this law, effectively banning abortion in the state and blaming former President Trump and Republicans and pressing for political advantage on an issue that could dominate a critical 2024 battleground. When Donald Trump released a video about his abortion stance on Monday, President Biden's campaign was ready to pounce, launching an aggressive strategy to pin the presumptive Republican nominee down on his record and amplifying his desire to take credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. There's no state that'll need to navigate Donald Trump's abortion stance quite like Florida, which has authorized one of the strictest abortion bans in the country, but also could broadly enshrine abortion rights protections in the state constitution through a ballot measure in November. President Biden, meanwhile, has been scooping up record-making donations and plowing the money into an expanding campaign operation in battleground states that appears to surpass what Donald Trump has built thus far. The Biden administration today finalized strict limits on certain so-called forever chemicals in drinking water that will require utilities to reduce them to the lowest level they can be reliably measured. Officials say this will reduce exposure for 100 million people and help prevent thousands of illnesses, including cancers. The rule is the first national drinking water limit on toxic PFAS, or those substances which are widespread and long-lasting in the environment. Health advocates praise the EPA for not backing away from tough limits that the agency proposed last year, but water utilities took issue with the rule, saying treatment systems are expensive to install and that customers will end up paying more for water. The parents of the convicted Oxford High School shooter were both sentenced yesterday to 10 to 15 years in state prison for their roles in failing to prevent their son from opening fire at his Michigan school in November 2021, killing 4 and wounding 7 others. It is the first such conviction of parents of a child who committed a mass shooting in the U.S. Jennifer and James Crumley were each found guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter in separate trials earlier this year. When President Biden hosts Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the White House for an official visit today, a senior administration official said the two countries will make historic announcements that will take the U.S.-Japan alliance to new heights. And the State Department has green-lighted an emergency $138 million in foreign military sales for Ukraine to provide critical repairs and spare parts for Kyiv's Hawk missile systems. The U.S. announced the move yesterday, saying that Ukraine has an urgent need for the maintenance support to keep the missile system running. The U.S. transferred thousands of machine guns, sniper rifles, rocket launchers, and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition seized from Iran to Ukraine last week. Ukraine has been suffering from shortage of weapons and munitions on the battlefield in its war against Russia, with the U.S. unable to send more equipment from its own stockpiles until more funding is approved by Congress. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin warned that Ukraine's recent attacks on Russian oil refineries risk impacting global energy markets and urged the country to focus on military targets instead. An explosion caused by an alleged drone attack at Europe's largest nuclear plant in Ukraine posed no direct threat to its safety, but underscored the extremely serious situation at the facility that repeatedly has been caught in the war's crossfire. It is following the devastating Russian attacks on the northeastern Ukrainian region of Kharkiv that President Zelensky has visited the area to review the situation today. Russia's second attempt to test launch a new heavy-lift rocket from its Far Eastern space complex was aborted this morning. The launch of the Angara A5 rocket was cancelled 2 minutes before its planned time of 9 o'clock GMT. Russian officials scrambled to help homeowners displaced by floods as water levels rose in the Ural River. It is floods in that region near Russia's border with Kazakhstan that have sparked the evacuation of thousands of people following the collapse of a dam. Floods engulfing cities and towns across Russia and Kazakhstan after Europe's third longest river burst its banks, forcing over 110,000 people to evacuate and swamping parts of the Russian city of Orenburg. The foreign ministers of Britain and France called on NATO countries to do more to support Ukraine and ensure Russia does not prevail, warning that the world is watching and will judge us if we fail. An area of low pressure in the Atlantic Ocean brought coastal flooding, rough seas and rains to parts of England and western France early this week also. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Peter Higgs has died at the age of 94 following a short illness, according to the University of Edinburgh. Higgs, who was an emeritus professor at Edinburgh, is known for discovering the Higgs boson, a subatomic particle known colloquially as the God particle. In 1964, he theorized the existence of an energy field and an accompanying chargeless particle that gives other particles their mass and exists throughout the universe. The Olympic rings for the Paris Games will be displayed on the Eiffel Tower, according to the president of the monument's operating company. Jean-François Martin said work to set the rings on the tower would begin at the end of the month after the Olympic torch has left ancient Olympia in Greece, and the rings will be on the side of the tower. France and Spain will step up security ahead of the Champions League quarterfinals being held in Madrid and in Paris today. And this is because of citing threats from Islamic State. Islamic State alleged to have threatened 4 venues for this week's Champions League matches, including the Parc des Princes in Paris and 2 games in Madrid hosted by Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, who face Manchester City and Borussia Dortmund, respectively. Spain's parliament agreed to consider legislation that could grant residency and work permits to hundreds of thousands of foreigners living in Spain without proper documentation. And Venice is commemorating its most famous citizen, Marco Polo, with a major exhibition to mark the 700th anniversary of his death. The show features excavated finds, maps and books, and can be seen in the Doge's Palace until the 29th of September. Includes loans from many countries that the merchant from the Italian lagoon city traveled to, from Armenia to Mongolia and China. The European Court of Human Rights ruled yesterday that countries have an obligation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to protect people from the effects of climate change, marking the first successful international court ruling on climate change. The decision sets a legal precedent for climate litigation within the Council of Europe's 46 member states, including the 27 European Union nations. Europe's top rights court said Switzerland was not doing enough to tackle climate change in a historic decision that could force governments to adopt more ambitious climate policies. And it is Ecuador's president, Daniel Noboa, who took a big gamble when he violated international rules by sending police to storm the Mexican embassy. So far, it's paying off for him. Police raided the building to arrest Jorge Glass, a former vice president convicted of corruption, who had been granted asylum. Mexico cut diplomatic ties, while the U.S. and every major country in Latin America condemned Ecuador's actions. South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma is free to run in May's general election after an electoral court overturned a ban on his candidacy. Last month, the Electoral Commission had barred him over a contempt of court conviction. And Ethiopia's state-appointed Rights Commission is calling for an investigation into the killing of a prominent opposition figure recently released from prison. And gunmen have ambushed a police convoy in Iran's restive southeast, killing 6 policemen. The attack on a road in Sistan and Balochistan province also left 2 other policemen wounded. The Taliban's highly private supreme leader made a rare public appearance today, leading thousands of worshippers in prayers for Eid. As confirmed by an Afghan government spokesperson, Hibatullah Akhundzada took over leadership of the Taliban in 2016 and guided the group back to power following the U.S. troop withdrawal in 2021, has seldom been seen in public. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. Australia has hosed down speculation Japan may be formally invited to join the AUKUS security partnership, saying Tokyo's involvement would be limited to cooperation on developing advanced technologies. There are no plans to expand AUKUS beyond its 3 founding members, said Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at a press conference in Canberra, referring to Australia, the UK and the US. Added that AUKUS would look for external research cooperation cooperation on a project-by-project basis. China vowed this morning it would not accept criticism or pressure over its ties with Russia after Washington warned that it will hold Beijing responsible if Moscow makes gains in Ukraine. Chinese leader Xi Jinping held rare talks today with the former president of Taiwan, who supports closer ties with China, a highly unusual meeting just weeks before the democratic island swears in a new leader Beijing openly loathes. A Gurudwara president, also the owner of a construction firm, was shot dead in Canada. Indian gangsters are suspected to be behind the killing of Bhuta Singh Gill, who was shot near a construction site in Edmonton's Millwoods area. He was the owner of the firm Gill Built Homes. According to Canada-based sources, Indian gangsters have tied up with pro-Khalistan elements in the country and are extorting funds from rich Indian origin Canadians. This killing comes nearly 10 months after the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the president of Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara in Canada's Surrey, who was designated by India as a terrorist. Elections for the posts of the mayor and deputy mayor in the Municipal Corporation of Delhi are scheduled for the 26th of this month, with the deadline for filing nominations set for the 18th. And jailed Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal today said he was ready to bear all atrocities of this dictator government as long as it serves to save the constitution. The message was conveyed by Aam Aadmi Party Minister Gopal Rai after he, along with other prominent party leaders, including Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann, MP Sanjay Singh, and Aam Aadmi Party members Sandeep Pathak and Saurabh Bharadwaj convened to meet Sunita Kejriwal at the Delhi Chief Minister's residence. Delhi Minister and Aam Aadmi Party leader Rajkumar Anand said this morning he has resigned from the cabinet and the party post. The BJP announced Sanjay Tandon as its candidate for the lone Lok Sabha seat of Chandigarh, replacing two-time MP Kiran Kher. The 60-year-old is the party's co-in-charge for Himachal Pradesh and the son of former Chhattisgarh governor, late Balramji Das Tandon, who was one of the founding members of the Jan Sangh and later also served as Punjab BJP chief. The Calcutta High Court today ordered a court-monitored CBI probe into alleged crimes against women, forcible land grabbing in West Bengal's Sandeshkhali, and the court has directed the CBI to file reports on illegal conversion of agricultural land for pisciculture. It is one element missing in the build-up to the Lok Sabha polls if statements and appeals by the ulema or the clerics, if no major Muslim organization, including Islamic seminary Darul Uloom Deoband or the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, has told community members which party or alliance to vote for. Community leaders said it is because the silence is strategic. In an IPL encounter in Mumbai tomorrow, desperate Royal Challengers Bengaluru will be up against an equally desperate Mumbai Indians, and they will have a lot of pressure to pull together. A Pakistan International Airlines flight from Jeddah to Islamabad carrying Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Punjab Chief Minister Maryam Nawaz back from their visit to Saudi Arabia was diverted to Lahore Airport. It was supposed to land in Islamabad but was diverted to the Allama Iqbal International Airport in Lahore, and the passengers were disembarked there, which caused inconvenience to hundreds of other Islamabad-bound passengers. Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai, after showing concerns over 26 million out-of-school children and a large number of vacant seats for teachers in Pakistan, has offered a helping hand and asked the Prime Minister to focus on the education sector to promote education in a letter to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Pakistan celebrated Eid with most of the Muslim world today as leaders expressed solidarity with the people of Gaza, where a 6-month-long Israeli military invasion has resulted in the deaths of more than 33,000 Palestinians and injuries to many more. While extending warm Eid greetings to Pakistan and the broader Muslim community, President Zardari called for a spirit of compassion and generosity towards the less fortunate and highlighted the essence of sharing and caring that marks the end of Ramzan, the holy month of fasting and prayer. Amid raucous protests and walkouts by PTI members, PPP Senator Yusuf Raza Gilani and PMLN Senator Saidal Khan Nasser were elected unopposed as the Senate chairman and deputy chairman, respectively. And that happened yesterday. And now they hold the distinction of being elected to 3 of the 4 top constitutional offices. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you. In a minute, I'll get you the financial news that you need to know to take on the day today, and today is Wednesday, the 10th of April. Let's start our financial news segment with the foreign currency exchange rates. The Indian rupee is at 83.37, Pakistani rupee 277.93, Bangladeshi taka at 109.81. The Sri Lankan rupee at 298.44, the Nepalese rupee at 133.46, British pound 0.79, the euro at 1.93, the Canadian dollar 1.37, the Australian dollar 1.53, Mexican peso 16.46, Chinese yuan 7.23, Japanese yen 152.55, the Russian ruble at 92.35, the Thai baht at 36.65, and Turkish lira 32.30. In the lead up to the Eid holiday break, the Pakistani rupee displayed resilience, staying steady against the U.S. dollar in interbank trading today. And U.S. stocks meandered before the bell this morning, still going nowhere in the wait for a crucial inflation reading that could ease worries interest rates will stay higher for longer. Futures in the Dow Jones Industrial Average nudged 0.1% higher, while those on the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 hugged the flat line. It is investors digesting one of the most important data points that the Federal Reserve will consider in its next interest rate decision, March's Consumer Price Index. That inflation report has actually come out. It is 3.5% is headlining inflation, and that is an acceleration from February's 3.2% annual gain in prices. An anxious wait there was providing clues on the outlook for interest rates, keeping markets moving in check this morning, but that report is now out. Big banks churned out more profits for much of last year as regional lenders struggle, but their performance in the first quarter of this year is not expected to dazzle. As U.S. banking giants prepare to report slightly lower first quarter profits, investors will focus on how much more income executives expect from interest payments this year. JP Morgan Chase is likely to post a 4% drop in earnings per share from the year-ago quarter, and U.S. mortgage rates last week topped 7% for the first time in a month, while home purchase applications fell by the most since the middle of February. The contract rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage rose 10 basis points to 7.01, and that depressed the group's index of mortgage applications for home purchases, which slipped 4.7% to the lowest level in a month. Gold's rally to successive all-time highs isn't over, according to macro fund managers, with the factors that have powered a near 20% surge since mid-February expected to fuel more gains. Gold has turned into money for Costco, where yellow metal sales begun last year have turned into a cash cow for the big box retailer. In fact, sales are so brisk that analysts at Wells Fargo expect revenue may now be running at $100 million to $200 million a month, a rapid acceleration since the bullion hit the warehouse club late in the summer of last year. Deliveries of Boeing airplanes dropped during the first quarter of this year to their lowest number since midway through 2021 in the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. The aerospace giant delivered 83 passenger jets during the first 3 months of this year, a drop from 157 during the previous quarter and 130 in the first quarter of last year. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration investigating a Boeing whistleblower's claims that the company dismissed safety and quality concerns in the production of the plane maker's 787 and 777 jets. Boeing company facing a deepening crisis of confidence after this engineer, the U.S. plane maker, alleged the company took manufacturing shortcuts on its 787 Dreamliner aircraft in order to ease production bottlenecks of its most advanced airliner. A Senate subcommittee has summoned Boeing CEO David Calhoun to testify about the company's jetliners in an inquiry prompted by new safety-related charges from this whistleblower. The panel said it'll hold a hearing next week featuring a Boeing quality engineer. His name is Sam Salipur, who is expected to detail safety concerns involving the manufacture and assembly of the 787 Dreamliner. Delta Airlines' first quarter results flew over expectations as travel remained resilient and a resurgence in corporate travel occurred. Google Cloud joined AWS and Azure in announcing its first custom-built ARM processor dubbed Axion. Based on ARM's Neoverse 2 designs, Google says its Axion instances offer 30% better performance than other ARM-based instances from competitors like AWS and Microsoft, and up to 50% better performance and 60% better energy efficiency than comparable x86-based instances. Trump media shares have been slipping in recent days, so has Donald Trump's net worths. He's no longer listed on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, a daily ranking of the world's 500 richest people after the stock price for Trump Media, the parent company behind the former president's social media company Truth Social, took a nosedive. Shares dipped 12% and then again 8% this week after sliding as much as 4.8% yesterday, and the stock rallied to close at 37.47. Yesterday was the first time the stock fell below 35.50 since Trump Media merged with the public shell company Digital World Acquisition Corporation. Walt Disney World and Disneyland are changing their policies for guests with disabilities. The Florida and California resorts will keep their popular disability access service, but adjust qualifications, registration procedures, and length of validity to help ensure guests receive the accommodations that they need. The school cafeteria versions of popular kids' grocery store snack kit Lunchables is packed with too much sodium, according to a consumer watchdog group. Lunchables developed 2 new versions of the snack kit specifically to be available nationally as part of the school lunch programs for the first time last year. But a new report from Consumer Reports said it recently compared the nutritional profiles of the 2 Lunchables kits served in schools and found they have even higher levels of sodium than the Lunchables kits consumers can buy in stores. The Coca-Cola company is rolling out new redesigned soda bottles for the first time in a decade. The 12 and the 16.9 and the 20-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, and Minute Maid refreshments are sporting new shapes that require less raw material to produce. Starbucks Corporation doesn't want you to have to shout to order your iced latte. The coffee chain's new and renovated stores include materials like baffles on the ceiling that help to reduce background noise and reverberations. That could make it easier for guests, especially those with hearing loss, to communicate, while also dampening the din that can make it difficult for baristas to discern what customers are saying. And it's time to dig out that biggest cup that you can find, or whatever you think can pass for a cup, and take part in Slurpee season at 7-Eleven this Saturday. It's the annual Bring Your Own Cup Day for Slurpee drink season. And this means people will be able to fill up almost anything, like a milk carton, a motorcycle helmet, or even a fish bowl with that frozen goodness of their flavor of choosing for only $1.99 at 7-Eleven, Speedway, and Stripes. And for the first time, the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship outdrew the men. UConn's 75-60 victory over Purdue in Monday night's men's final on TBS and TNT averaged 14.82 million viewers. That was not enough to surpass the 18.87 million who watched South Carolina defeat Caitlin Clark and Iowa in Sunday afternoon's women's final on ABC and ESPN. Regulators received heavy opposition from truck owner-operators and safety advocates on a proposal aimed at making it easier to test and employ new drivers. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's proposal rule increased flexibility for testing and for drivers after passing the skills test would loosen current CDL testing regulations. With the COVID-19 pandemic came a new era of remote work for many 9-to-5 office workers, and as we move out of the pandemic, this shift seems to have left a lasting preference for hybrid work. According to a report, workers now have a greater preference for hybrid work than for remote work, with 29% of the 6,625 people polled saying they prefer hybrid work compared to 23% who preferred remote work. That's a flip from last year when 27% preferred hybrid and 29% preferred remote. About half of U.S. adults say the country's public education system is generally going in the wrong direction. According to this Pew Research Center survey, 51% feel that way, while just 16% say it's going in the right direction, and about 32% are not sure. A new rule from the EPA was finalized and will affect dozens of chemical plants in Texas. The EPA updated its emissions guidelines for chemical plants under the Biden administration by ordering them to limit the amount of toxic chemicals that could escape into the atmosphere. And this new regulation asks plants to reduce their emissions of toxic pollution by more than 6,200 tons per year. And this will impact 218 plants across the U.S., and 80 of those plants are in Texas alone. Within those 80 plants, there are some in Corpus Christi, Longview, Lufkin, and Big Spring. However, most of them are located in one area, Houston. A new deepwater oil export terminal is coming to the Texas Gulf Coast. The Biden administration has approved the permit for this new terminal. The Seaport Oil Terminal, planned for a site about 30 miles off the shore of Freeport in the Gulf of Mexico, will load oil into supertankers, potentially exporting 2 million barrels of crude every day. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing Harris County over a guaranteed income program. Last year, County Judge Lina Hidalgo said the county would randomly select nearly 2,000 residents with incomes at 200% below the poverty level and give them $500 a month for a year and a half. The federal poverty line is equivalent to a family of 4 earning a $60,000 yearly income. And Paxton says the program redistributes public money in a manner that violates the Texas Constitution. And the funds come from $20.5 million that Harris County received in 2021 that were intended to be used for COVID relief. 25 years after the 1999 bonfire collapse that killed 12 people, the Texas Tribune obtained a letter from one of the newest members of the A&M Systems Board of Regents. John Bellinger of San Antonio wrote to families of the bonfire victims asking for input on the possibility of resuming that bonfire with oversight from A&M's administration. He's also a member of a committee formed by the new Texas A&M president Mark Welch after the University of Texas became a member of the Southeastern Conference. The Fort Worth City Council unanimously approved a zoning change allowing for a 149-room Hampton Inn and Suites to be built on North Main Street, just south of Northwest 29th Street. And the Stockyards district that is in that area attracts scores of visitors throughout the year, and they need a place to stay. It'll be a longer day for pre-kindergarten students in Fort Worth next year. Starting this fall, pre-K students in Fort Worth will attend school during the same hours as all other elementary school students. They'll start at 7:50 in the morning and will be dismissed at 3:20. For pre-K students, that is 50 more minutes of learning every day. The Biden administration is preparing to take the unusual step of issuing an order that will prevent U.S. companies and citizens from using software made by a major Russian cybersecurity firm because of national security concerns. And the company responsible for a global recall of sleep apnea machines will be barred from resuming production at U.S. facilities until it meets a number of safety requirements. Under this long-awaited settlement, Philips will be required to overhaul its manufacturing and quality control systems and hire independent experts to vet the changes. The company must also continue to replace, repair, or provide refunds to all U.S. customers who got the defective devices. The European Union Court of Justice ruled to remove Russian billionaire Mikhail Friedman and Peter Avin from a list of individuals facing European Union sanctions after Russia's attack on Ukraine. And a labor dispute at Brazil's environmental regulator is gumming up Latin America's largest economy, with major oil and mining projects facing delays and imported cars piling up at ports. Thailand's Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin revealed details of his government's plan to stimulate the economy by giving digital cash handouts of 10,000 bahts, that's $275, to an estimated 50 million Thais for spending at their local businesses. Jack Ma took an internal Alibaba forum to voice his support for a company undergoing a turbulent restructuring, emerging from seclusion for the second time in months to try to shore up sagging morale at the Chinese e-commerce pioneer that he co-created. The billionaire, who had retreated from public spotlight in recent years, penned a lengthy memo in which he blessed efforts by the new leaders to revive a stalled company. He said that Alibaba Group Holding is now on the right track and urged staff to stay the course. Fitch has cut its outlook on China's sovereign credit rating to negative today, citing risks to public finances as the economy faces increasing uncertainty in its shift to new growth models. Meanwhile, India is posting some of the most robust economic growth rates right now in the world, and with China slowing, India could become the new engine of global economic growth. Tesla chief Elon Musk will visit India this month to meet Prime Minister Modi and is expected to make an announcement related to his plans to invest and open a new factory in the country. The billionaire executive will meet Prime Minister Modi in the week of the 22nd of this month in New Delhi and will separately make an announcement about his India plans. His office, Modi's office, and Tesla did not respond to this request for comments. Musk's final India trip agenda could still change. Indians have founded more offshore unicorns than any other country, co-founding 109 unicorns outside of India, compared with 67 in India. Unicorns are basically startups worth at least $1 billion and not yet listed on a public exchange. The BBC in India will separate in two from today as it seeks to meet the country's foreign investment rules. The BBC retains its news gathering team in India for its English language digital television and radio outlets headquartered in London, and a new independent Indian-owned company called the Collective Newsroom will now produce content for the BBC's 6 other Indian language services. And this move comes a year after BBC India's offices were searched by authorities. The Hindi service will now be produced by the Collective Newsroom along with Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi, Tamil and Telugu, as well as a YouTube channel, BBC News India, in English. BSE Sensex and the Nifty 50, the Indian stock market indices, scaled all-time high in trade today, and the Indian benchmark equity index Nifty 50 achieved a record high, boosted by banking, energy and IT stocks ahead of the release of the U.S. inflation data, and that is, of course, as I mentioned already, out. As the Indian stock market enters the new financial year at the beginning of this month, it's important to note the upcoming holidays in this month. The trading activities on the National Stock Exchange and the Bombay Stock Exchange will remain closed on 2 weekdays this month. They close tomorrow in a celebration of Eid, and on the 17th for Ram Navami. Gold rates have surged significantly in recent months, rising by 17% between the 12th of February and today. It is 17% increase. Trouble for Air India Limited mounting, with aircraft technicians planning a strike later this month after its pilots voiced concern last week about being overworked and underpaid. The Supreme Court today has rejected the affidavit filed by Patanjali offering an unconditional apology in connection with misleading advertisement case, and the court has warned both Baba Ramdev and the company's MD Acharya Krishan to brace themselves for potential repercussions. The International Finance Corporation Board has approved $400 million in financing for PTCL Group's purchase of Telenor Pakistan. And this decision follows Pakistan Telecommunication Company Limited signing of a share purchase agreement with Telenor Pakistan to acquire a 100% stake in the company on a cash-free, debt-free basis. Bulls continue to dominate the trade floor as shares at the Pakistan Stock Exchange surged by more than 600 points on optimism over investment from Saudi Arabia. And the quantum of remittances increased to almost $3 billion last month, taking it to the highest level since April 2022, primarily due to Ramzan. And while people continue to face acute water shortages in many parts of the metropolis of Karachi on Eid, there is no respite in sight from the water woes, even during the 3 days of the religious festival, with the suspension of supply through water bowsers for the next 2 days. And when every last-minute detail for Eid is taken care of by the ladies of the house, there is only one thing left to do, and that's the henna application. After that, you can't do much, as you have to wait for the henna to dry out. And it is the Teen Talwar in Clifton looking for the best henna artist for the job today during Eid celebrations. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you right here on Community Radio Networks. And if you'll give me one more minute, I'll get you the final segment of our program for today. It is Wednesday, the 10th of April. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the final segment of our program today. And first, let's get you some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, which is the 10th of April. It was in the year 1849 that Walter Hunt, a mechanic and independent inventor from New York, patented his metal invention with a spring called the safety pin. And although later businessmen would make a fortune selling this ubiquitous device, he sells rights to it for just $400 and never earns anything else. And that was the safety pin that was patented and on today's date in 1849. A day after surrendering to Union General Ulysses Grant, Confederate General Robert E. Lee addresses his army for the last time. After 4 years of arduous service, marked by unsurpassed courage and fortitude, the Army of Northern Virginia has been compelled to yield to overwhelming numbers and resources, he said. On today's date in 1865, I need not tell the brave survivors of so many hard-fought battles who've remained steadfast to the last that I have consented to the result from no distrust of them. I determined to avoid the useless sacrifice of those whose past services have endeared them to their countrymen, and I bid you an affectionate farewell, he said. And on the 10th of April in 1866, ASPA, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, is founded in New York City by philanthropist and diplomat Henry Bergh, who was 54 years old. He had been appointed by President Abraham Lincoln to a diplomatic post at the Russian court of Tsar Alexander II. It was there that he was horrified to witness workhorses beaten by their peasant drivers en route back to America. A June 1865 visit to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in London awakened his determination to secure a charter not only to incorporate the ASPCA, but to exercise the power to arrest and prosecute violators of the law. And when he was back in New York, on behalf of these mute servants of mankind, he said at a meeting, he argued that protecting animals was an issue that crossed party lines and class boundaries. It's a matter purely of conscience. It has no perplexing side issues. It's a moral question in all its aspects. And the speech prompted a number of dignitaries to sign his Declaration of the Rights of Animals. And as this pioneer and innovator of this humane movement, ASPCA quickly became the model for more than 25 other humane organizations in the U.S. and Canada. And by the time he died in 1888, 37 of the 38 states in the Union had passed anti-cruelty laws. Emiliano Zapata, a leader of peasants and indigenous people during the Mexican Revolution, is ambushed and shot to death in Morelos by government forces on today's date in 1919. His influence has endured long after his death, and his agrarian reform movement, known as Zapatismo, remains important to many Mexicans even today. In 1994, a guerrilla group called themselves the Zapata Army of National Liberation launched a peasant uprising in the southern state of Chiapas. He was assassinated in Mexico on today's date in 1919. And in 1941, on the 10th of April, the German and Italian invaders of Yugoslavia set up the independent state of Croatia, also including Bosnia and Herzegovina, and placed nationalist leader Ante Pavelić Ustaše, the pro-fascist insurgents, in control of what is no more than a puppet Axis regime. The Ustaše began a relentless persecution of Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and anti-fascist Croats. As many as 350 to 450,000 victims were massacred, and this concentration camp became infamous as a slaughterhouse. It was Croatia's Serbs who gave sporadic resistance, but it was the communist partisans that provided anti-fascist leadership. Most of Croatia by 1944, apart from the main cities, was liberated from Axis forces, and Croats joined partisan ranks in large numbers. As the war neared its end, however, many of them, especially those who had been involved with the Ustaše regime or had opposed the communists, sought refugee status with the Allies. But British commanders handed them over to the partisans, who slaughtered tens of thousands, including civilians, on forced marches and in death camps. But it was Croatia that was declared independent on today's date in 1945. 1941. And a day after the surrender of the main Philippine island of Luzon to the Japanese, the 75,000 Filipino and American troops captured on the Bataan Peninsula begin a forced march to a prison camp near Cabanatuan. And it is during this infamous trek known as the Bataan Death March that the prisoners were forced to march 85 miles in 6 days with only one meal of rice during the entire journey. And by the end of the march, which was punctuated with atrocities committed by the Japanese guards, hundreds of Americans and many more Filipinos had died. And the day after Japan bombed the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, the Japanese invasion of the Philippines began. And within a month, the Japanese had captured Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and the U.S. and Filipino defenders of Luzon were forced to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. And for the next 3 months, the combined U.S.-Filipino army under the command of U.S. General Jonathan Wainwright held out impressively despite a lack of naval and air support. The Bataan Death March began on today's date in 1942. And then on today's date in 1953, the horror film The House of Wax, starring Vincent Price, opens at New York's Paramount Theater. Released by Warner Brothers, it was the first movie from a major motion picture studio to be shot using the three-dimensional or stereoscopic film process, and one of the first horror films to be shot in color. It was the first color .3D film that opened on today's date in 1953. The House of Wax, a remake of the 1933 Mystery in the Wax Museum. Moviegoers had to review The House of Wax through special stereoscopic glasses to see its full 3D effect. And the lenses were specially tinted so that the viewer would see the right and left eye images only with the eyes for which they were intended. The 3D process proved specially effective during the film's climactic chase scene. You're listening to the soundtrack of House of Wax that launched Vincent Price on his long and successful career as a star of horror movies. The House of Wax, released on today's date in 1953. And then on the 10th of April in 1961, Gary Player, a 25-year-old South African, beats defending champion Arnold Palmer and amateur Charles Coe by a stroke to become the first international champion at the Masters. Palmer double bogeys the 18th hole at Augusta National to give Player that win. Happened on today's date in 1961, and as part of golf's Big Three with Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, Player often was lost in the shuffle, but he was one of the sport's greatest, winning 9 major championships. He was revered in his home country, where he was called Sportsman of the Century in the year 2000. Because of rain, the final round was postponed, and Player, called the bold little man in black by the media, finished with a 74 an hour ahead of Palmer. On the final hole, Palmer's third shot from a sand trap rolled down a bank, and then his fourth shot landed 15 feet short of the cup, and the two putted for a double bogey 6, giving the title to Player. He said, as he earned $20,000 for the victory, "Frankly, I'm very proud of myself." He wasn't done winning majors. In addition to winning the British Open in 1959, he won that title 2 more times, 1968 and 74, as well as the Masters twice more, 74 and 78, the PGA Championship twice, 1962 and 72, and the 1965 U.S. Open. But he becomes the first international Masters champion on the 10th of April in 1961. And then on the 10th of April in 1963, the USS Thresher, an atomic submarine, sinks in the Atlantic Ocean, killing the entire crew. 129 sailors and civilians were lost when this sub unexpectedly plunged to the sea floor roughly 300 miles off the coast of New England. This was the Thresher from the naval yards in New Hampshire, built with new technology. The first submarine assembled as part of a new class that could run more quietly and dive deeper than any that had come before. But on today's date, in 1963, just before 8 a.m., the Thresher was conducting drills off the coast of Cape Cod. And at 9:13, the USS Skylark, another ship participating in the drills, received a communication from the Thresher that the sub was experiencing minor problems. Other attempted communications failed, and only 5 minutes later, sonar images showed the Thresher breaking apart as it fell to the bottom of the sea. 16 officers, 96 sailors, and 17 civilians were on board, and all were killed. President Kennedy ordered that flags across the country be flown at half-staff to commemorate the lives lost in this disaster. A subsequent investigation revealed that a leak in a silver brazed joint in the engine room had caused a short circuit in critical electrical systems, and the problems quickly spread, making the equipment needed to bring the Thresher to the surface inoperable. The disaster forced improvements in the design and quality control of submarines. And 25 years later, Vice Admiral Bruce DeMars, the Navy's chief submarine officer, said, "The loss of Thresher initiated fundamental changes in the way we do business, changes in design, construction, inspections, safety checks, tests, and more. We have not forgotten the lessons learned. It's a much safer submarine force today." It was the USS Thresher, that submarine that sank in the Atlantic, killing all on board on today's date in 1963. And in 1970, on the 10th of April, when promoting the release of his forthcoming solo album, Paul McCartney announces that he is taking a break from the Beatles, the legendary rock band that he had been a part of for a decade. It wasn't that much of a surprise. The Beatles spent the better part of 3 years breaking up in the late 1960s, and even longer than that, hashing out who did what and why.
Baby, I'm amazed the way you love me all the time.
By the spring of 1970, there was little more than a tangled set of business relationships keeping the group together. Each of the Beatles was pursuing his musical interests outside of the band, and there were no plans in place to record together as a group. But as far as the public knew, this was just a temporary state of affairs. No one had yet gone on the record and with a definitive breakup statement.
Baby, I'm a man. Baby, I'm a lonely man who's in the middle of some
Paul McCartney.
that he doesn't really understand. Baby, I'm a man, and maybe you're the only woman who can ever help me.
And by the year's end, Paul would file suit to dissolve the Beatles' business partnership, a formal process that would eventually make official the unofficial breakup that he had announced on this day, the 10th of April in 1970. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it was the U.S. table tennis team that begins a week-long visit to the People's Republic of China at the invitation of the China's Communist government. And the well-publicized trip was part of the PRC's attempt to build closer diplomatic relations with the U.S. and was the beginning of what some pundits in the U.S. referred to as ping-pong diplomacy. Happened on today's date in 1971. Diplomatic relations with the U.S. and the PRC had ended in 1949 when the U.S. severed ties to the new communist government that had taken power. And throughout the 50s and 60s, the U.S. and the PRC remained implacable enemies. And during the Korean War, they clashed militarily. And during the 60s, they supported opposing sides in the conflict in Vietnam. But by the late 60s, the communist leadership in the PRC began to rethink its policy towards the United States. This ping-pong diplomacy worked. And in June of 1972, President Richard Nixon made a historic visit to China to begin talks about reestablishing diplomatic relations. The Chinese table tennis team also toured America, causing a short-lived craze for table tennis. The U.S. table tennis team that visited Communist China on the 10th of April in 1971, starting the ping-pong diplomacy. Today is the 10th of April, and these were some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date. One more day of rain, and then a beautiful weather pattern is shaping up tomorrow through Sunday. And we have rain showers and isolated strong storms that are developing today and continue through the afternoon. A very strong upper-level disturbance will cruise directly overhead, and we have a cold front that is arriving to boot, and it'll be skies will be clear overnight as the dry air filters into the area, and you'll wake up to temperatures between 45 and 50 tomorrow morning. But that beautiful weather pattern starts tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, breezy and cool, and afternoon highs will top out in the 70s. I want to thank the supporters of community radio networks. I have huge thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Ahluwalia Law Offices, the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, Kinzer Law, Michaelachi, Ruchi Palace by Michaelachi, Shri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flashbrush Productions. For those who want to learn music, the Shruti Sangeet Academy, Indian classical vocal lessons by certified classical vocalist and talk show host Shanta Mishra. You can explore the soul of Indian music. They offer a comprehensive curriculum with personalized instruction and immersion in bhajans, shlokas, and folk music. You can learn classical ragas, you can master vocal techniques, embrace rhythm and tal, and experience Indian culture like never before. For more information, y'all can call 612-562-4432. 612-562-4432. We also have Color Me Safe Foundation, which is a family crisis management organization serving the greater Dallas area. And they have launched 2 new educational initiatives. One is called Ask Auntie, and the other is Sathi Support Group. Through discussion on topics such as generational and cultural gaps, cultural identity, mental health, bullying, and many more, these programs seek to empower South Asian children and families with the tools and understanding to overcome these shared challenges in a very supportive and non-judgmental space. So for more information, you can contact ColorMeSafeFoundation.org. The U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce, in their Spirit of Innovation Technology competition, are having a business plan presentation this Friday from 9 to 1 at the Brookhaven College on Valley View Lane in Farmers Branch on this Friday, the 12th. And you can get more information at the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce website, usicoc.org. That's on Friday. On Saturday, Vibha are having their 18th annual Kite Flying Festival at the Sound at Cypress Waters on Olympus Boulevard in Coppell. And this is from 3 to 8. It's free admission, free parking, and you should bring the family to come and enjoy Vibha's annual event. The 18th Kite Flying Festival. They'll also have Talent for a Reason coming up, where you will have plenty of talent of our community being showcased out there at the Sound Amphitheatre in Coppell. On Sunday, Music That Feeds, a Hunger Mitao initiative, an evening of melody with a difference. And it'll be on Sunday from 4 to 7 at UTD's Johnson Performance Hall. April is celebrated as Diversity Month, so please join the Dallas Symphony Orchestra for a special pre-concert event celebrating the importance of diversity, inclusion, equity, and unity. The U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce pleased to partner with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra to promote Celebrate Diversity Night on the 19th of April from 6 to 7 at the Meyerson Symphony Center. And this pre-concert event features performances, light snacks, and drinks, and it is free for you. But you can go ahead and buy tickets for the concert later, which is Troop Vertigo at the Meyerson Symphony Center. The Hyderabad Society of North Texas invite you to their Eid picnic, and of course Eid Mubarak to everyone today. This Eid picnic is on Saturday the 20th of April from noon until 6 o'clock at the Travick Pavilion in Grapevine. And for more information, you can call Muhammad Hamid at 469-544-4118. Pratham's annual gala is on the 20th of this month, and just a few days remaining for that. We're excited to announce that limited individual tickets are now available. This is at the Omni Frisco Hotel, an evening that ignites minds, touches hearts, and empowers futures. And during that evening, you'll be mesmerized by Vidya Vox's captivating voice and vibrant electronic soundscapes as she presents a special musical performance that blends tradition and innovation. And our keynote speaker is Krish Dhanam, a captivating speaker mentored by the legendary Zig Ziglar. And you are encouraged to incorporate a splash of Pratham yellow into your attire. And we will be hosting a best dressed contest during the reception, as well as a social media likes contest. Over the course of the evening, you'll also indulge in a decadent meal crafted by our finest chefs and let the conversations flow from like-minded individuals passionate about creating change. Ladies and gentlemen, your presence at the Pratham Dallas Fort Worth Gala symbolizes a child supported with the opportunities needed to realize their dreams, secure job prospects, and embrace a brighter future illuminated by the power of learning. 20th of this month, Saturday, at the Omni Frisco Hotel. Making your social calendar, we have Pooja Batra, who will be a celebrity guest, and that'll be on Sunday, the 21st of April at the Grand Center. And we have Bismilki Mehfil coming up on Sunday, the 21st at 6:30, and this will be at the Sambuca 360 in the shops at Legacy. Every individual can contribute to healing the world with thoughts of peace and love. World Meditation Hour, where we focus on sending thoughts of peace and healing for the whole world. Sunday, the 21st of April from 6:30 to 7:30. And you can get more information and register at BK, Brahma Kumaris are bringing this, bkrymeditation.us. EarthX 2024 Congress of Conferences happening from the 22nd to the 26th at the Hilton Anatole. And we also have Jeet Ka Safar with the Amex, with the champions, the 2009 T20 World Cup cricket team that is going to be here in Dallas. And Umrao Jan, Neetu Chandra playing that role based on the novel written by Mirza Hadi Ruswa, a music play in the Broadway style on the 26th and 27th of this month. And that'll be in three different shows on these 2 days, and tickets are available at ticketmaster.com. The Festival of Joy by Kalachanjis will be on the 27th of April at the Clyde Warren Park. And Lions Club's Festival of India invites you to their 39th annual celebration on the 28th of April at the Atithi Banquet Venue in Plano. We do have Shilpa Shetty coming into town on the 29th of June, and Indian Idol, the Intense Tour, on the 10th of May. Unforgettable 90s with Kumar Shanu and Sadhana Sargam on the 12th of May. Junoon Show on the 19th of May. Please mark all these and we'll get details to you as they happen. And Badshah's Pagal Tour on the 14th of June at the Curtis Culwell Center, where Shreya Ghoshal will be performing that same weekend on Sunday, the 16th of June. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the information that I have for you for today. It's Wednesday, the 10th of April. Wishing everyone who is celebrating Eid today a wonderful Eid. And for those of you who would like to reach me directly, please go ahead and call me at 214-675-1754.